The galaxy had seen many wars, but no one expected the small blue planet called Earth to become the center of such conflict. For centuries, powerful empires had dominated trade, politics, and diplomacy, while humans were barely noticed among the stars. They were considered weak, backward, and far too emotional to play any real part in galactic affairs. That illusion shattered when the unexpected war began. It started with a mistake. The Zalari Empire, known for arrogance and pride, sent one of their finest diplomats to Earth. She was young but held authority beyond her years. Her family was powerful, and her words carried weight that could bend alliances. When she stepped onto Earth's soil, she carried herself as if she were addressing lesser beings. To her, humans were nothing but a curiosity, a species destined to serve or fade away. But humans had grown stronger in silence. They had studied alien technology in secret, building ships and weapons beyond what others thought possible. They had learned patience, and with patience came the ability to strike when no one expected. The diplomat's mission was simple: intimidate humanity into joining the empire under harsh terms. She believed her presence alone would be enough. From the first meeting, her tone was sharp. She mocked the human council's simple clothing, their nervous way of speaking, and their lack of grandeur. Her words carried venom wrapped in silk. "Your world is fragile," she told them. "If the empire wished, your oceans would boil. Your cities would vanish, and your people would kneel in chains. Accept our terms, and you may survive as caretakers of your own dirt." The human delegates tried to remain calm, but anger brewed behind their eyes. They had seen arrogance before, yet something about her superiority felt like a personal insult. Still, they held their tongues, waiting for the right moment. She thought silence meant fear. In truth, it meant calculation. The first blow of the war did not come from ships or soldiers. It came from a bold act no one expected. During a formal gathering held inside a grand orbital station above Earth, the alien diplomat arrived in her radiant robes, her voice commanding the chamber like thunder. She ridiculed human culture openly, calling their traditions primitive and their achievements meaningless. She smirked as if she were already victorious. The humans had prepared a response that was neither violent nor submissive. In the middle of her speech, a single man stood up. He was not a general nor a council leader. He was a soldier, one who had survived battles on Earth's frontiers against alien raiders. His name did not matter to the galaxy, but his act would be remembered. He walked toward her with steady steps, ignoring the guards who moved to block him. His eyes locked with hers, and for the first time, she saw defiance where she expected obedience. He took her ceremonial staff, the symbol of her authority, and snapped it in half before the entire assembly. The sound echoed like thunder, and silence fell across the chamber. The alien diplomat's face burned red with rage. No one had ever dared to humiliate her in such a way. Among her people, such an insult demanded blood. Her voice shook as she shouted, her words like fire. "You dare! A human dares lay hands on me?" The soldier did not flinch. He spoke calmly, his words sharp enough to cut the air. "You came here to remind us of our place. Let me remind you of yours. We are not afraid of your empire. We will not kneel." Gasps filled the hall. To challenge a Zalari diplomat was to challenge the empire itself, but the soldier's act was more than defiance. It was a declaration that humans would no longer be underestimated. The diplomat trembled with fury. In her eyes, this was no longer a negotiation but an insult to her bloodline. She promised retribution, not only against the man but against all of humanity. Her pride had been wounded, and pride was more dangerous than fleets. The galaxy watched as tension thickened. Other species whispered that humans had made a fatal mistake. To humiliate such a figure was to invite destruction. Yet some secretly admired the boldness. No one else had ever dared to stand against the empire so openly. For the humans, It was a turning point. They knew war was coming. The Diplomat would return to her empire with tales of disgrace, demanding vengeance. But they also knew something else. The bold act had given them something more powerful than weapons. It had given them unity. The unexpected war had begun not with lasers or bombs, but with a single human standing tall against arrogance. And though the galaxy expected humanity to fall quickly, those who understood Earth's spirit knew the fight had only just begun. Asterisk. The orbital station returned to silence after the soldiers' bold act, but silence did not mean peace. The alien Diplomat stood frozen, her eyes locked on the broken staff that once symbolized her authority. Her hands shook as if she were holding back the urge to strike him down right there. The guards waited for her command, but she held them still with a single raised hand. She wanted her revenge to be greater than a moment of anger. The human soldier walked back to his seat, his head high, while whispers ran through the chamber like wildfire. The other delegates, human and alien alike, looked at one another in disbelief. No one had ever humiliated a Zalari diplomat, and certainly not a human. What would follow was uncertain, but everyone knew the weight of that moment would ripple across the galaxy. Later that night, the diplomat stormed through her private quarters aboard the station. Her servants followed in silence, afraid of her sudden outbursts. She paced back and forth, her long robes dragging across the polished floor. Her words spilled like venom. How dare he? How dare a human touch what belongs to me? They think themselves equal now. I will burn this planet until nothing remains. She picked up a glass from her desk and threw it across the room. It shattered into pieces, but the act brought her no comfort. Her pride had been pierced in front of witnesses, and the only cure was vengeance. In her culture, reputation was power, and hers had been dragged through the dirt. Meanwhile, the Human Council gathered in a dimly lit chamber deep inside the station. The soldier who had broken the staff was present, his eyes steady as the others debated. Some called him reckless, saying his act had doomed them all. Others said his courage had shown the galaxy that humans would not be ruled by fear. The council leader leaned forward, his voice low. The Empire will not let this pass. They will return with fleets, and the war will begin. We must prepare. But remember this, the galaxy has seen our strength now. They know we will not bow. The soldier remained quiet, but deep inside, he knew the council leader was right. His act had not only humiliated the diplomat, but had forced humanity into the spotlight. The Empire would strike, but humans had been waiting for this test. Across the stars, news spread quickly. Holochannels replayed the scene of the staff snapping in two, the defiant words of the human soldier echoing through every broadcast. Some alien races laughed, saying humanity had just signed its death sentence. Others whispered admiration, secretly cheering for the humans who dared to defy the Empire. The Zalari homeworld received the news with outrage. The ruling council demanded answers from their diplomat. She appeared before them, her face a mask of anger and shame. She told them of the insult, of the human's arrogance, and of her humiliation before witnesses. She demanded fleets, soldiers, and fire to avenge her honor. The council debated. But in truth, their decision was already made. They could not allow such defiance to spread. If humans went unpunished, other smaller worlds might rise as well. The Empire's grip on the galaxy depended on fear, and the humans' act threatened to weaken it. War was no longer a choice, it was a necessity. Back on Earth, preparations began in secret. Factories roared with activity, building ships and weapons. Soldiers trained harder than ever before, knowing the coming storm would test every ounce of their strength. The people stood united, their spirits lit by the boldness of one man. For the first time in history, humanity was not divided by borders or nations. They were united by survival and by pride. The diplomat, however, had her own plans. She refused to leave Earth's orbit, instead remaining aboard the station. To her, fleeing now would appear weak. She demanded her guards increase their presence, patrolling the halls and intimidating anyone who crossed her path. She would stay until her empire's fleet arrived, and then she would watch the humans kneel in chains. One evening, as she walked the corridors of the station, she saw the human soldier again. He did not avoid her gaze. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Around them, guards tensed, waiting for violence. But no blade was drawn, no order given. Finally she spoke, her voice sharp. "You have stolen my honor. When my fleets arrive, I will take it back with fire." The soldier replied calmly, "You cannot take what we never gave. You came to break us, but all you have done is make us stronger." Her lips curled into a thin smile, though her eyes burned with rage. "We shall see. When the stars burn above your world, remember this moment. Remember that it was you who brought the fire upon your people." She turned and left, her robes flowing like a wave of anger behind her. The soldier remained still, his heart steady. He knew the storm was coming, but he also knew something the diplomat did not. Humans had always been underestimated. That mistake would cost the Empire dearly. The galaxy was shifting. A new chapter was beginning. And though fleets and armies would soon clash, the true battle had already been decided in the unshaken heart of a single human, who dared to stand against arrogance. The first sparks of war lit up the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Reports came in from deep space that Zalari fleets were moving. Carriers, destroyers, and swarms of smaller ships had begun gathering at forward stations. Entire trade routes shifted overnight as merchants fled, afraid to be caught in the storm. The galaxy whispered of the coming clash, but on Earth, there was no whisper, only preparation. Factories burned with endless light as workers pushed themselves beyond exhaustion. Old machines were rebuilt, new weapons tested. From the deserts of old Earth to the frozen poles, soldiers trained as if the war had already begun. Humanity had always been stubborn, but now it had purpose. Every man, woman, and child knew what was coming. The alien diplomat's insult had struck deep into their pride, and the soldiers' defiance had given them a reason to rise together. The diplomat remained on the orbital station, her presence like a blade pressed against human pride. She demanded luxury, demanded respect, and her guards terrorized the halls. Yet her arrogance was not as unshaken as before. At night, when she looked at the stars, she replayed the scene of the broken staff in her mind. She could still hear the snap of wood, the defiance in the soldier's eyes. For the first time she began to wonder if she had underestimated this species. Her pride, however, refused to let doubt grow. She told herself the humans were reckless children. When the Empire's fleets arrived, their cities would fall, and their resistance would be crushed like dust. Still, in the quiet of her chambers, she could not escape the thought of that man. He had dared to touch her, dared to humiliate her before others. It was no longer only about empire and diplomacy, it had become personal. The human soldier, meanwhile, had become a symbol without intending it. Across the planet and even in distant colonies, his image was shared. The man who had broken the staff, who had spoken the words, "We will not kneel." Strangers whispered his story with admiration. Young recruits trained harder because of him. Leaders spoke his name when they needed courage. Yet he remained quiet, continuing his duty as if nothing had changed. He had not acted for fame, only for pride. The council called him often, asking his view on strategy. He was not a general, but his insight carried weight. He knew how soldiers thought, how they fought, and most importantly, he knew what it meant to be underestimated. He told the council plainly, "The Empire expects us to break at the first strike. We must show them the opposite. We must bleed, but we must not fall." When word came that the first Zalari fleets had crossed into human Space, fear spread like cold fire. But fear did not paralyze humanity. Instead, it sharpened them. Ships launched from hidden docks, armed with weapons no one outside Earth had seen before. They were not the largest fleets in the galaxy, but they were fast, clever, and built with human stubbornness. On the orbital station, the Diplomat's fury grew with each passing hour. She sent endless reports to her empire, demanding they strike harder, demanding they make humanity suffer. Her hatred for the soldier who had humiliated her became an obsession. She watched for him in every meeting, her eyes burning holes into him whenever he appeared. One evening, during a gathering of leaders, she could no longer hold her tongue. She rose from her seat, her voice cutting across the hall. "You dare prepare for war as if you are equal. You are insects. When my fleets arrive, your skies will burn. You, all of you, will crawl before me." The soldier stood slowly, his expression calm. "We would rather die standing than live crawling." His words sent a murmur through the chamber. Some leaders lowered their eyes, but others straightened their backs. His defiance was contagious. The Diplomat's chest heaved with rage. She slammed her hand on the table, and her guards moved instantly, weapons ready. For a heartbeat, the air seemed ready to explode into violence. But the human council leader raised his hand and spoke firmly. "This is still a place of diplomacy. Draw your weapons here, and it will be the Empire's shame, not ours." Reluctantly, the guards stepped back, though their eyes never left the soldier. The Diplomat sat again, but her fury only deepened. She whispered to herself, her voice like poison, "He will pay. I will make him pay." Beyond the station, the first battle had already begun. Human outposts lit up with fire as Zalari ships attacked. But what the Empire expected to be an easy victory turned into a grinding fight. Human ships fought with reckless bravery, using tactics no one else dared. They rammed enemy cruisers, detonated reactors, and turned battles into chaos. The Zalari commander sent back reports of unpredictable savages, who fought as if death meant nothing. The Diplomat received the news with disbelief. She had promised her council a quick victory, but the humans refused to collapse. Every battle cost more ships, more lives. The Empire could still crush them with numbers, but the cost was rising, and the galaxy was watching Dot in the dim light of her chambers. She stared at the stars once more. Her anger was no longer only about humiliation. It had become a burning need. She would destroy this human, the one who had dared to stand against her, no matter the cost. And yet, in the shadows of her thoughts, a strange feeling stirred a recognition that beneath her fury, there was something else. Something she refused to name. Asterisk, the war spread like fire through the stars. The Zalari Empire pushed forward with overwhelming force, expecting resistance to crumble. Instead, they found a species that refused to yield. Human ships struck from hidden positions, retreating only to strike again with greater ferocity. Battles that should have been swift victories became long, bloody contests. Reports piled up. Enemy refuses surrender. Casualties heavy. Humans fight beyond reason. The alien Diplomat read these reports with growing frustration. Each page was another reminder of her humiliation, another failure to erase. The insult burned into her pride. Her superiors demanded progress, questioning her judgment. Her answer was always the same: more fleets, more firepower, more destruction. But even as her empire pressed harder, she began to see a truth that frightened her. Humans fought with a kind of madness that could not be crushed by numbers alone. On Earth, the soldier who had sparked it all remained calm amid chaos. He was no longer just a man, he had become a symbol. His presence in meetings carried weight that even seasoned generals respected. Soldiers wore his likeness on their armor, whispering his words before battle. Yet he did not seek glory. He trained with the recruits, stood in the trenches, and carried himself as though the war belonged to all of them equally. The diplomat could not ignore him. Every time she looked at the human councils, her eyes sought him first. His calm expression enraged her more than insults ever could. To her, he was a living reminder that she had been defied, that her pride had been broken. In her dreams, she imagined striking him down, imagined his people kneeling before her. But when she awoke, she felt a strange emptiness she could not explain. That one evening, after another heated meeting between humans and aliens aboard the orbital station, the diplomat lingered in the hall. Her guards stayed close, but she waved them aside when she saw him approach. The soldier walked with steady steps, his eyes locked on hers. She did not look away. "You have brought this war upon your people," she said coldly. "You think them strong, but they will break. And when they do, I will stand above their ashes." He studied her quietly, then spoke. "You are blind. It was never about war. It was about respect. You mocked us, and you thought fear would keep us low. But you forgot what pride does to those who are underestimated." Her hands tightened at her sides. His words felt like knives, sharp because they carried truth. She wanted to strike him, yet she also wanted to understand why his presence shook her so deeply. The station's corridors grew tense in the following days. Rumors spread that the diplomat had begun watching the soldier more closely than before. Some whispered she wanted him dead. Others whispered she wanted something else, something she would never admit. As fleets clashed across the stars, the Empire began to notice a dangerous pattern. Other smaller worlds were paying attention. If humans could resist, why not them? Seeds of rebellion stirred in quiet corners of the galaxy. The Zalari Council grew restless, realizing that crushing Earth was no longer only about punishment, it was about saving their own authority. But the harder they struck, the more humanity adapted. Human engineers turned destroyed ships into weapons. Civilians became fighters. Every loss only hardened their resolve. The diplomat read these reports with disbelief, her anger twisting into obsession. She no longer spoke of the Empire's honor. She spoke only of her own. "This human," she told her attendants, "is mine. His defiance belongs to me, and I will be the one to break him." Yet something began to change inside her. She found herself watching the soldier not just with hatred, but with a strange fascination. His refusal to bend, his quiet strength, even his calm voice unsettled her in ways she did not understand. In her culture, strength demanded respect, even from enemies. And though she told herself she despised him, part of her could not deny the fire he carried. One night, during a raid on the station by Zalari extremists who believed she had grown weak, the halls erupted in chaos. Explosions rocked the chambers, and guards scrambled to protect her. For the first time, her confidence cracked. As flames and smoke filled the air, it was not her guards who reached her first, it was the human soldier. He pulled her to safety with a strength that shocked her. For a moment, she resisted, furious that he would dare touch her. But the blasts grew louder, and instinct overpowered pride. She let him lead her through the collapsing corridors, his hand gripping hers with a steadiness she could not ignore. When they finally reached shelter, she turned on him, her voice trembling with rage and something else she could not name. "Why?" she demanded. "Why would you save me when I am your enemy?" He looked at her, his eyes calm. "Because war does not erase humanity. Even you do not deserve to die like that." Her chest tightened, her mind spinning. She wanted to shout, to strike him, to push him away. But instead, she stood frozen, her anger colliding with a feeling she had never expected. In that moment, as the fires burned behind them, the alien diplomat realized her war was no longer only about empire or vengeance. It had become something far more dangerous, a battle inside her own heart. The fires on the orbital station were extinguished, but the memory of that night lingered in the alien diplomat's mind. She could not forget the feel of his hand pulling her through the chaos, the steadiness in his eyes as explosions tore through the halls. She hated that moment, hated the weakness it revealed in her, yet she could not push it away. She told herself it was rage that burned in her chest, rage at being saved by the very man who had humiliated her before the galaxy. But when she closed her eyes, she remembered not her fury but his calm voice. "Even you do not deserve to die like that." The words cut through her pride in ways no blade ever could. The human soldier returned to his duties without ceremony. To him, saving her had not been special, it had been instinct. He saw danger, and he acted. That was the way of humanity. Yet he could sense her gaze more than ever. Wherever he went in the council chambers or training halls, her eyes followed him, sharp as daggers, yet filled with something unspoken. The war outside grew harsher. Zalari fleets continued to press into human space, but they found themselves fighting not just armies, but a whole people. Miners turned asteroids into weapons. Farmers converted machines into war tools, and civilians refused to abandon their cities, even under bombardment. The Empire's commanders grew frustrated, calling humanity a plague that spread resistance with every act of defiance. The Diplomat received these reports with both anger and unease. She had promised her empire an easy conquest, yet now she was forced to explain why their fleets bled in every battle. Her superiors began to question her role. Some whispered that she had lost her edge, that her obsession with the soldier had clouded her judgment. One night, she summoned him in secret. The guards outside her chamber were ordered to let him pass without question. Inside, she waited in silence, her robes glowing faintly under the light of alien crystals. When he entered, he saluted briefly but did not bow. That small defiance made her chest tighten with both fury and something she refused to name. "You humiliated me," she said softly, her voice trembling like the edge of a blade. "You made me a mockery before my empire. And yet, you saved me. Tell me, human, why?" He met her gaze without fear. "Because hatred cannot guide every choice. If we live only for vengeance, then we are already dead." His words unsettled her. In her world, vengeance was survival, pride was law. Yet his calm voice made her wonder if she had misunderstood strength all along. She stepped closer, her face inches from his. "You think you are stronger than me? That your people can defy the Empire forever?" He did not move. Strength is not in breaking others. It is in standing even when the galaxy expects you to fall. Her breath caught for a moment, and she hated herself for it. She turned sharply, her robe swirling as she faced the window where stars glittered coldly. "You speak like a conqueror, yet you are nothing but prey. Do not forget, human, that when my fleets arrive, there will be no mercy." He nodded once. "Then let them come, we will face them. Not because we think ourselves gods, but because we refuse to kneel." She clenched her fists, torn between anger and a strange admiration. Her pride screamed at her to strike him down. But another voice whispered that his defiance was the very thing her people feared most. In his eyes she saw not weakness but a fire she could not extinguish. Days later, the war reached a critical point. A massive Zalari fleet moved toward Earth itself, determined to break humanity once and for all. The Diplomat prepared to send her final orders to the fleet commanders, but hesitation struck her. If humanity fell too quickly, her personal vengeance would be incomplete. She wanted to see the soldier broken, not just his world destroyed. At the same time, she felt another conflict inside her, one she had never known before. She could not decide if she wanted to see him kneel, or if she wanted to see him stand forever. The thought twisted her heart in ways she could not explain. When she encountered him again in the war chamber, surrounded by maps of burning stars and broken fleets, she could no longer hide the storm inside her. She stepped close, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "You have poisoned my thoughts," she whispered. "I burn with rage, yet I cannot cast you from my mind. Tell me, "Human, what have you done to me?" He looked at her calmly, as always. "Nothing. You are the one fighting yourself." Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, the arrogant diplomat felt truly powerless, not before an empire, not before an enemy fleet, but before the quiet strength of a single human, and in that silence, she realized the war was no longer only about her pride or her empire. It was about him. The Zalari fleet finally arrived in Earth's orbit. A massive wall of ships blotted out the stars, their weapons glowing like suns. It was the moment the galaxy had waited for, the Empire's crushing blow against a small, defiant species. On the orbital station, alarms rang as civilians were rushed into shelters. Human ships scrambled to form a line of defense. Though their numbers were few compared to the Empire's armada, the alien diplomat stood at the command window, her heart beating with fury and confusion. This was supposed to be her triumph, her vengeance for the humiliation she had suffered. Yet as she stared at the human fleets rising to face certain destruction, she felt something she could not name. It was not satisfaction. It was not joy. It was unease. The soldier entered the chamber, his uniform marked by battle, his face calm despite the storm outside. He walked up beside her as if the galaxy's greatest armada did not frighten him. His voice was steady. "They've come to finish us, but we will fight. And if we fall standing." She turned to him, her eyes sharp, yet her voice trembled. "You are mad, you cannot win. Their numbers will crush you like insects." He looked back at her. "Then why do you fear us?" The question cut through her pride. She opened her mouth, but no answer came. In truth, she did fear them, not their weapons, not their fleets, but their refusal to break. That refusal was something her empire could not control. The battle began. Zalari ships opened fire, raining destruction on human defenses. Earth's skies lit up with fire. Yet the humans did not retreat. Their ships darted through the void, striking hard and vanishing into debris fields. They rammed enemy cruisers, detonated reactors, and turned their own sacrifices into weapons. Every loss carried a price for the Empire. The diplomat watched, her chest tightening with every report. She had promised her council that humanity would fall quickly. Instead, the humans were dragging the Empire into a war it had never expected. For every human ship that burned, 10 more rose in defiance. For every city scarred, 1,000 voices shouted that they would never kneel. The soldier fought on the surface, leading men and women into the streets as bombardments shook the earth. The diplomat saw him on the battle screens, moving through smoke and fire, carrying the wounded, rallying the terrified. He did not command with fear, but with presence, and those who followed him fought as though they could not die. In her chambers, she could no longer hold her fury. She struck the console, shouting at her fleet commanders, "Destroy them! End this now!" But the commanders hesitated. Losses were mounting. The humans had turned every advantage against them. Already, whispers spread across the galaxy, whispers of a species too stubborn to die, too proud to submit. Other races watched closely, some daring to hope that if humanity could resist, they too might rise. The diplomat's pride shattered as she realized the truth. Her humiliation had not been erased, it had spread. Her name was now tied to the one human who had stood against her. But instead of breaking him, she had made him immortal in the eyes of his people. She confronted him once more after the battle, raged for days without resolution. The station shook with the impact of weapons outside. She stood before him, her eyes burning with rage and something deeper. "Do you not see what you've done? You've dragged your world into ruin. You've made me a fool before the galaxy." He stepped closer, his voice firm, but not cruel. "No, you made yourself a fool when you thought pride was stronger than unity. You wanted to break us, but all you did was bring us together. Humanity will bleed, but we will not bow." Her breath caught, and for the first time, tears burned. at the edges of her eyes. She had lived her life believing arrogance was power, that fear was control. Yet in this single man, she saw a truth she could not deny. He had humiliated her not with strength of arms, but with something far greater, the courage to stand when no one else would. The battle outside dragged on until the Empire, bled and frustrated, withdrew to regroup. Humanity had not won outright, but neither had it fallen. Against all odds, they had survived. That survival was victory enough. The Diplomat remained on the station, her pride in ruins. She no longer shouted, no longer mocked. Instead, she stood in silence, watching the soldier who had undone her. She burned with rage still, but her rage had changed. It was no longer the fury of superiority, it was the fury of a woman who had been forced to see her enemy as equal. In the quiet after the storm, she whispered words only he could hear. "You have taken everything from me, my honor, my certainty, my power, and yet I cannot cast you from my mind. Perhaps that is your true weapon, human. Not your ships, not your armies, but the way you stand, unbroken, even when the galaxy is against you." He looked at her, his eyes calm, and simply said, "That is humanity." And with those words, the story ended, not with one side destroyed, but with a new truth burning across the stars. Humanity had proven that even the proudest empires could not crush a people who refused to kneel. And the arrogant Diplomat, once furious beyond measure, would never forget the human who had humiliated her and changed her forever.